Was that the fastest 91 minutes ever? It was a beautiful print. It's so great to see the details in the nice print. So, writer, director, producer, Jack Hill's name will forever be associated with films that feature strong, ethnically diverse, and sexually liberated women in leading roles. Though his directorial debut came in 1964 with the campy horror classic Spider Baby, released in 1968. Mr. Hill made his mark with two back-to-back women in prison films, The Big Birdcage and The Big Dollhouse, which he also produced and wrote. The Big Birdcage, which he produced and wrote, and the title of his 1975 cult classic Switchblade Sisters, re-released by Quentin Tarantino in 1996, Big Spritzer. But it would be his two following films, 1973's Coffy and 1974's Foxy Brown, that would cement his renown as an exploitation cinema maverick, a creative force who wore all hats and brought both black and white audiences alike into movie theaters and drive-ins around the world. The 90-minute film that we just saw knocked the James Bond film Live and Let Die out of the #1 spot on Variety's all-important top-grossing films list in 1973. At the end of the decade, with more than 250 blaxploitation films hitting theaters between 1970 and 1980, Coffy remains only one of 5 blaxploitation films to top any film list, much less Variety's. It's been 50 years since Coffy flickered across screens and wowed audience, but the impact of the film remains with us, and so does Mr. Jack Hill. Ladies and gentlemen, the man that Quentin Tarantino calls the Howard Hawks of exploitation cinema, and my all-time favorite director, the one and only Mr. Jack Hill. We've all come to see you. That's why we're all here. It's great to see you.
Okay.
Let's have a
Nice
seat.
to be here. It's always nice to see people laughing at my films or whatever you want to do. The picture was shown in Drive-In. Do you have that I wrote for the introduction?
Your reviews, yeah. Yeah, the reviews would comment on how the audience would interact. And in particular, when they were at drive-in theaters, they would honk their horns because they couldn't scream at the picture, right? They couldn't talk. So it was kind of, you couldn't hear the picture because there were so many horns honked. During all those great scenes.
Well, the thing about that I'd like to mention is, why would a reviewer from the Hollywood Reporter go to see this picture in a drive-in? Well, let me tell you, he's the one who reported that people were honking their horns after every dirty line and every violent moment in the show. But I went to see the film when it was done in a premiere in a black neighborhood near Pasadena in LA, which was about a 90% at least black audience. And it was frightening. I could understand why a white guy reviewer would not want to go to a primarily black theater. The people were standing up and screaming. You know, I thought, boy, this is what's the word for the Greek word for theater when you really, yeah.
That's above my pay grade.
Yeah, there's a word for it. I just can't think of it right now.
Party.
Huh? Yeah, catharsis on steroids. You know, so So sure, I can understand. And there was words, the theater, hardtop theaters didn't want to play the picture because they were afraid that people would tear up the seats and stuff like that. Can you imagine anybody wanting to tear up the seats? It's this racism from the heart, you know. There's just they don't. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that was it. And the reviews of Pam Grier's performance. The Time magazine review was actually very good. What did it say? I think I wrote it down. I forgot what I said. But
It talked a lot about how
yeah.
it satisfied audiences.
Yeah, the movie was a revenge as a what was it? I don't know. I forget the words now, but it was revenge way. It was something you must do. You know, it's not just for the revenge, but because it's a okay, maybe I'll think of it. Yeah, I wrote it down. Okay. You've got some questions, perhaps. Oh, this guy, turns out he knows the picture much better than I did. When I saw it tonight, I said, I didn't remember that. And that's funny, you know, when you see a picture for the first time in 50 years, you see all the things that you would like to have done differently. Things that you think, oh, God, I should have done it that way. We had a budget. Any movie crowd would ask two questions like, what was the budget and what was the schedule? The budget was $500,000, 18 days. And all I could think of was, it's just had another day or two. I could have done this and that. But it actually turned out pretty well. The actors all really loved what they were doing, and I thought they were, for the most part, they were really extremely good. I was surprised. The guy who played Brunswick, what's his name? I forget now.
That's not Robert Duquie. Brunswick is...
Brunswick.
Booker Bradshaw.
Booker Bradshaw, yeah. He had been a student of the Royal Dramatic Arts in London and was a protege of, what's the famous actor who was in that studio? I can't think of his name right now. Yeah, so there's a serious Shakespearean actor, believe it or not. Yeah.
I've got some questions for Jack, and then if any of you have any questions, have them ready. You've got him here. This is the man that wrote and directed the film you just saw, as well as so many others. The first question I have, I've always wanted to ask, what happens to Coffy after she walks down that beach at the end of the film?
How the hell would I know?
Now, I know you wrote backstories on them all. So what was...
No, I don't
was she going to be
work
arrested? Was she going to...
I said, no, I don't work that way. I work with just what I feel is right. You know, I'll give an example of where the theme of the whole story came from. I was given the assignment. Were you going to ask me about the assignment? No, that's not. Okay. It was very good. Okay. AIP wanted to do a black exploitation picture because they had been offered Cleopatra Jones, and they thought that was going to be really good, right? But the producer of Cleopatra Jones got a better deal with Warner Brothers, better budget, you know, and that says a lot, getting a better budget, you know. And so he took the project, and the head of production at AIP, Larry Gordon, he was so annoyed by that. He wanted to beat them to the screen with his own similar type of thing, but he wasn't prepared for what I came up with, but he loved it. He thought it was a really great idea. And it beat, well, I think, you know, they spent, MGM, Warner, they spent so much money on promotion of Cleopatra Jones that they did pretty well. But that's money spent that the producer doesn't. They spend so much in advertising. Coffy, the advertising was, well, AIP, you know, they just, they didn't have the advertising budget, but we beat the picture very nicely, so that felt good. Anyway, so the assignment, he called me in the assignment, and Larry Gordon, and at first when I went into the studio, I thought, oh, this is my big break, and I'm going to get to do a real movie, because I had done this women in prison pictures, you know, So I called him and he said he wanted to do a black woman revenge movie. And I thought, oh, that's not what I want to do. I want to do, serious. But then I got the idea, Pam Grier, a chance to work with Pam Grier, and I had this idea, make a black woman's revenge with Pam Grier. She can do it. And so I went home and I started thinking, he wants to do a revenge movie. So there's a book, 36 Dramatic Situations. Anybody familiar with them? Whole team? That's a secret that a lot of screenwriters keep. Anyway, it's 36 dramatic situations, and all of literature and all of theater, he broke it down into only 36 dramatic situations. One of them was revenge. So I looked for that, and I came up. Mine was a little different from many of the examples, but revenge taken against a lover for the death of a kinsman. That's a secret where writers get their stuff, sometimes. Okay. What do you want to ask me?
Just so you know that Coffy and Cleopatra Jones were both released in 1973, just a few months apart. So I know you heard both those titles. Again, Cleopatra Jones was turned down by was taken by the producer to Warner Brothers. Otherwise, they would have made that. And then they hired Jack to make the complementary film, and that was going to compete with the other one.
Yeah, we beat them very nicely. Watching this movie tonight, after 50 years since I saw it, was a lot of surprises there for me. And I was very happy to see the audience react the way I intended, which was good. And I think if I was going to do that today, I'd do it a little bit more mild, I think. But yeah, it was quite new and revolutionary first time, so yeah.
So Jack is a writer, and director. Do you consider yourself a writer who directs or a director who writes?
Both.
Equally.
Yeah, I've written pictures, scripts that other people have done, and I have gotten writers to do scripts for me. The best example of that would be a picture that nobody's mentioned here. I don't think the swinging cheerleaders. I think it's streaming somewhere. If that's something you get a chance to see, I think that's one of my really best movies. And I hired a writer, which I knew very well, who worked very closely with me, and we got a really great script out of it, and it was a huge hit.
Speaking of writing, we are here in 2023 at a time when Hollywood writers are on strike. How do you feel about that?
I hope they wouldn't. I'll tell you something about writers. Writers have always been kind of jealous of directors who get the credit when the writer's not getting credit. So to have a credit written and directed by, that's what I find really means something. But because writers very often feel that they're not getting credit for the directors are getting credit for a movie that somebody else wrote. Yeah.
You mentioned the word racism. Would you tell us a little bit about Hollywood and racism in the 70s?
Oh yeah, well I can tell you. I think what you're asking is about the racism that I had to deal with in making a picture like this. Things have changed a lot since the last 50 years. Oh, well, you know what I'll tell you? A few years ago, I was at a convention, and a black woman came up to me and told me that she had insisted that her daughter watch Coffy so that she would know how things were like back then. And I found that really, really remarkable. She wanted her daughter to see this brutal movie, because of the racism thing. And a lot has changed since then. Yeah. So let me see. You were asking me what was it about?
So I remember you saying once that the guys, the producers and the studio heads, were so racist that they didn't even see these films, even though they financed them.
Could be. I could really tell you that the racism we had to deal with. There's two levels there. Am I making too much of a puff in the microphone, or is it okay?
No,
Fine. Okay, good. Yeah, there was the press had been very critical of Hollywood studios making blaxploitation films because they were taking all this money from black people who bought tickets, and they weren't hiring black people behind the camera, other than players. And we were very, very conscious of trying to fix that problem, to do that. But the fact was there were almost no black technicians at all, no camera people. To join the cameramen's union, you had to be the son of a former cameraman. It was really like that. But there was, for us, it was a problem because the people, they just weren't there, And black stunt people, there's just very, very few black stunt people. And Bob Miner, who was the actor who played Studs in this, was the stunt gaffer. And he was one black guy that we could actually find who could do something. And it was his first job at being a stunt gaffer. And so it was rocky at times. We had fingers crossed when there was danger. But he made it, and now he's one of the top people in the business, and he was a very good actor as well. But then they hired an assistant director, a black guy, and within 2 days they had to do something because he was not functioning at all, and we were going to be behind schedule. And so they kicked him upstairs in a way. They gave him a higher job to take him off the picture, but we couldn't replace him with another assistant director because that would have really looked bad. So the production manager took on the job of assistant director, which made things tough because he was doing 2 jobs. And so that was unfortunate. But so today, now, of course, there's plenty of black technicians, but at that time, there was none.
Another thing Mr. Hill did was he was the one that brought attention to the fact that not only were there not black stunt people in the 70s, there were no black stunt women in the 70s.
Yeah, 0.
None in Hollywood. So there are lots of times a black stunt woman is needed. When they were needed, they were painted brown to be a black woman while taking a tumble or in a fight. There were no black stunt women in 1973 in Hollywood. Mr. Hill brought attention to that.
So they did blackface.
Yes.
I never knew that before. But they did find a girl who did the stunts for Pam in this, and she was brand new in the job. So the scene when she's running across the freeway with all the cars coming in, that was the stunt girl, and we were. But the stunt drivers really knew their stuff, so she was really a lot safer than she felt. But it was a really great, it worked out fine, So yeah, it was.
You just mentioned that magic name, Pam Grier. How did you come to work with her? You worked with her so many times.
Well, I first met Pam Grier when I was casting a picture that became The Big Dollhouse. And we were just doing it because the cast was all girls, as you can imagine. And so we were having kind of what they used to call a cattle call. Bringing actors, a lot of people were coming in for interviews, and sometimes I would interview women together to see how they played off of each other, this kind of stuff. And she just came in on the cattle call to my office, and I met her, and she had never done anything except a walk-on in the Russ Meyer movie, which you can see the reason for that. And but she just impressed me with what we used to call authority. When she's on screen, you're going to look at her. So I just took my chances on her. Unfortunately, Roger Corman, who was the producer on that, liked her as well. I mean, he had to approve of everybody that I cast. And so she practically stole the show into The Big Dollhouse. Yeah. And then when I did a sequel to that called The Big Birdcage, of course, I wrote specifically for her and Sid Haig. They were my, what's the name of the famous couple?
Roger Corman, was it?
No, the famous couple. I can't remember the name. Okay. Anyway, so then when the studio, they weren't sure that they wanted to hire Pam. They had some other actress that they were considering. Now, I'll tell you a little thing about this. Why it's good to understand. In those days, if you wanted a player from an agent, they had agents, and if you were an actor that you wanted, the agent would sometimes force you to cast somebody else, another client that they had that they wanted to get jobs for. And so in this particular case, there was an actor that they wanted whose agent had a client that was this girl that the studio was considering. So this is the kind of stuff you have to deal with in those days, probably still, But I insisted that there was just the role I was writing. There was nobody else could do it. There was no other actress who could play the character that I wrote there. There's no question about that now, I think. Yeah.
Can you imagine they were even thinking of someone else to play Coffy? Who would come to mind? She does it so perfectly. Now, we all know what Pam Grier looks like. She looks very exotic, and she looks like a mix to many people. In the original script that Jack Hill wrote, he has her say a line, "My ancestors are a combination of African, Mexican, American, Indian, and Filipino." That line was cut. We're not sure why, but I wanted to ask you if you think there's a reason they cut that.
Well, I don't remember putting in the script, but that was something that Pam herself told me about herself, about her ancestry, that I thought was, she's a total salad, of all these different races, which is quite remarkable. I didn't remember writing it into the script, so you got me there.
Coffy went to #1, as we know, one of very few films. Period, and very few blaxploitation films. Tell us a little bit about the sequel that was planned.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a good story for you, actually. This is Hollywood for you. When I had finished Coffy, oh, by the way, let me tell you something about the way they work. You think that a director has control over everything, all the way through to the finishing of the film, sound effects, music, and everything. No, not with that company or companies like that. They hated directors. They thought that the directors made a mess and they were going to fix it in the editing, and all of a sudden they liked to do that. So once I finished shooting, I had all my contract owed me called for a first cut, rough cut, and fortunately, my way of working by that time had developed so that I made sure that there was nothing, that I didn't shoot anything that I didn't want in the picture, so that the editors were forced to use what I put in and not to add in stuff that I didn't want. So I did not have final cut or anything like that, but as it turned out, it was pretty much what I would have done that had final cut. And so back to your question, that's a background for it. What's the question again?
So they wanted to know a little bit about, what was my question?
Oh, yes, right. So, yeah, that's important to understand that, okay? Because I made the terrible mistake of, let me see, the IP made this picture Dillinger, which I was invited to the screening and I walked out on it. That's something you just don't do in Hollywood, is walk out on somebody's screening. So the studio hated me. They just hated me. They never wanted to see me again. So when it came time to do a sequel, by that time, Coffy had become such a huge moneymaker for the studio that the owner of the studio, Sam Markov, he didn't give a shit about somebody walking out on the screen, and he needed me back again, right? So I was working with people who just hated me. So anyway, Foxy Brown. Now, what happened in that particular picture was that they gave me very, very little time to develop a script. And the head of the production, Larry Gordon, had, because of the successes of pictures like mine, had gone on to hire bigger things. And so I was not given the kind of freedom that I had been given before. So my feeling was, let's just, I had very little time to develop a new story, so I just said, let's just make it as outrageous as possible. Just throw everything in. And it turned out that was exactly the right thing to do. I mean, over the years, Foxy Brown has been far, far more profitable. Yeah, I mean, what's the figures of it? Streaming and all of this and that stuff has been way, way more. I know this because I get residuals as a director and writer. And residuals on Foxy Brown are always 3 times what they are on Coffy. So I must have done something right. I wanted to make it just as outrageous as possible, and instead of trying to do something right. Yeah, that's.
Mr. Hill's script for Coffy was novelized and rewritten by someone else in 1973, so it is a paperback. Did you get any money from that?
I had nothing to do with it, and the writer's name was a pen name. I don't even know who actually wrote it. And I looked at the first few pages. It was so disgusting. I couldn't even. And Pam Grier read it, and she was just pissed. She was just really pissed because she identified with the character, and the descriptions of the character in the book, taken from the screenplay, she thought that was her, and she was just outraged by it. I don't think the book ever sold very much. That was not a movie that you want to have a novelization of.
That's that very soft porn paperback that they took his writing, his script, and made it into a story. I do not see very many filmed interviews of you anywhere on YouTube or any streaming. Did you give out interviews in the 70s?
Not back then, no, but in the past 10 years or so I have been, because my films are still going strong when other big movies have been forgotten.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I have actually earned from the tiny little percentage that you get on residuals as a writer and director. I've earned many, many, many times over the original, what I was paid originally for. Yeah.
That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, and it's still going. I still every quarter. I haven't talked about money, but the money is statistically what people are enjoying, looking for. Yeah.
Mr. Hill went on to make many more films, but stopped making films in 1982. His final film is Sorceress. Tell us about how you turned your back, really, on Hollywood.
Oh, well, that's a really unpleasant story. That was a picture that I thought it was kind of going to be a big comeback for me because it was a picture that I thought would have a lot of big, expensive budget, a lot of great special effects. And but the whole procedure was, I'll just make it cut it short. The whole procedure was they wanted me to, I wrote a script that was set in Central Asia in ancient times. And the first thing, this was for Roger Corman, and he wanted me to shoot in the Philippines. It's set in Central Asia. So then he went back and he said he's got a deal to shoot it in Italy. Oh boy, because Italy, they have all these great rolling locations in North Africa and places like that it would be just perfect. So we went to, my wife and I went to Portugal because, this came before the Italian one. Roger had somebody who said he could set up a production in Portugal. So they sent us to Lisbon. And it turned out in Portugal, there was nothing that you could make a feature film with. They were making TV commercials. That was about it in those days. So then he called and said, he's got it set up in Italy. He wants me to go to Italy right away. So we went to Rome. And we were talking to producers in Rome. They were very happy. They loved the script. They were all ready to do it, and all of a sudden they got a call. I got a call. He said he's got a better deal in Mexico. Shoot it in Mexico.
Yeah.
This is Roger Corman's story. So this is the best one. Anyway, so we went to Mexico, and we had the Mexican government was partially financing the film. So they had a pretty good budget for Mexico. And we could build big sets and great locations and everything. And let me just give you one little example of the problems we had. We were shooting one day where we were going to shoot exterior in the morning and then come in the afternoon on the soundstage, which was all set up and ready for us. So we shot in the morning and we came to the soundstage and it was empty. What was the producer doing, the Italian guy doing? They were shooting Dune there. They took over the studio, took all of our equipment out and everything, because that was, who was the Italian producer?
I don't remember.
Dino Laurentiis. I actually met him at the time. He had taken over all our, so that you can imagine what that does to your time schedule. Anyway, that's just a hint at all the kind of stuff we went through. So I ultimately, Roger, he hired these. He was so angry that we went over budget, and he wanted me to have nothing to do with finishing the picture. So he hired these two brand new editing team, two guys who didn't know what they were doing, and put picture. never mind. Anyway, the whole thing. So I took my name off it, and still the picture turned out to make money. It's not worth seeing.
We would have liked you to make more pictures, write more pictures, and give us to love. Just so you know. So, do you recognize your influence on other directors and writers? Quentin Tarantino, as you know, is one of your biggest fans.
Yeah, Quentin. How can you not like a guy who says things like that? That's about all I can say. Yeah, he was a really sweet guy.
For the record, after Coffy was released, successors are always copied, right? So there are 5 or 6 other female protagonists, female hero films. Some of them are Velvet Smooth, Sugar Hill, Lady Coco, and others that came out right after Coffy because they saw the success.
Oh, okay. He knows much more about it.
You made a lot of films starting in the 60s. Is Coffy your biggest success in your mind?
Biggest success? Well, yeah. The big Dollhouse was a huge financial success, but I didn't get anything from it, much from it myself. Coffee and Box Around, I had Writers Guild and Directors Guild protection on it, so that made it different. What are you asking me, really?
Just asking, artists often think or love something more than what was their biggest success.
Oh, well, it's hard to say. There's 2 pictures that I think I really did well. And one was now it's called Pit Stop, and it's about car racing. It's about figure 8 racetracks. And when I first saw it, that spectacle myself, of course, basically it's crash. You know, if you have an intersection and people are racing, you're going to have crashes. And it was the most spectacular thing I ever saw. And I said, I've got to make a movie about this so in the future, it'll be this total insanity will be. And I figured overseas audiences, which actually has turned out to be interesting lately, have really appreciated it. But I did a really good job with it. I had a very minuscule budget, but very good script. Anyway, that was about figure 8 racing. I figured that would be something that should go down in history as something totally wacko. Anyway, Richard asked me what I like. Well, I really think that the Swinging Cheerleaders was a good job. It was very successful, but also it was my only really kind of real comedy. If you could call it a comedy. Anyway, yeah, that's good.
I think the audience loves Sid Haig. Tell us about how you met him and how you brought him into your films.
Sid Haig was in my student film at UCLA, which is actually, if if anybody would be interested in seeing it, it's an extra on the Switchblade Sisters DVD release. Quentin Tarantino knew that I had made this film, but it was never really finished because there were things that on the university budget we just couldn't do. So he really went to a lot of help with me on that. Well, actually, he went to a lot of trouble and cost to help me get that film finished and even get a music track and everything for it. So it was really nice, but it exists. And that's when I was first working on it, my advisor, my mentor at UCLA, Dorothy Arzner, who was very, very successful, the first really successful female director, A director, and she was an advisor at UCLA. And so that was something that was really did some good work on at the time. Anyway, so it's a student film. So she had been advising at the Pasadena Playhouse, which is a great training place for actors in those days, and Sid was somebody that she thought was just really, really good, so she recommended him to me to do my student film. That's where we met. And then when I got a chance to make this movie that eventually turned out to be
The Crazy Family.
Spider Baby.
Spider Baby. Thank you.
So you're gonna get me up here aligned in the microphone. Okay, yeah. So when I was going to shoot that, I wrote a part in it for a character in it, just with Sid in mind, and that was kind of his first. Well, he had done. He had done with me at Pit Stop. Of course, he was in Pit Stop. So, and then when I got to do. The big dollhouse, actually, I put him in there, and so that's your answer. That's it. He started out with my student film at UCLA.
Do we have any film students here? Yeah. The film students, I think, would want to know, do you need to go to film school, or are filmmakers born, like writers?
Oh,
did you learn anything at UCLA, or did you already know everything?
Oh, I knew everything, sure. I just went for fun, you know, just because they gave you a camera and film to work with, yeah, sure. That's, I can't answer a question like that, but I can only say that, I had some experience in film in a way. My father was an art director at Warner Brothers. By the way, just as a footnote, he went on working for. He had met Walt Disney in 1919. They were both in Paris at that time. My dad was a flyer of the aviator, and Walt Disney was I think he was 17 years old, I think, when he was 2. They wouldn't let him enlist, so he became an ambulance driver, a volunteer ambulance driver, and that's how he met my dad. And they kept in contact. For many years after that, my dad did designs for some of the Disney shorts, and he did the castle designs and interiors for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And then, of course, he did the Disneyland castle. That was the final design to Disneyland.
Did you hear that? The castle at Disneyland was designed by Jack's father.
Wow. Yeah, he had quite an interesting life, actually. Yeah. Anybody familiar with Kiki de Montparnasse, the famous French model? Okay, she was his lover for a while in Paris. Yeah, there's the most famous photograph of Kiki, original photographs by Man Ray, Man Ray, the photographer. Yeah, he was her lover also, almost simultaneously, I think. And the most famous photograph is the Le Violon d'Angre, which is her back, naked back, sitting with the F holes of a violin on her back. Yeah, that was Kiki's most famous picture. What was your question?
You answered it.
Okay, I very easily could digress.
And we love it. Are you guys ready to participate too?
Yeah.
If you have a question, just raise your hand. I see a striped shirt. Yes, please.
I know you too.
You did, yeah.
Just
Good question.
Jackie Brown? Yeah, it's just that he really did a fine. I don't know why anybody would think that I had anything to do with it, other than sort of, being the originator of Pam Grier's career. I think he threw in a couple of references to. There was a scene when there's a black girl nurse walking through the background there, which I think it was deliberate. Aside from that, I don't know what else I could say about that picture. It was very, very well done.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, Jack. Thanks so much for being here. This is great to hear you and see you and celebrate you. I love Coffy with a shotgun is one of the great combinations, and I love when a character and a weapon makes sense. Voorhees and there's different things that just make sense.
Yeah.
What was the thought process, or why you picked a sawed-off to start and a pump to end? What is it about a shotgun and Coffy that worked for you?
A phallic symbol.
Yeah.
I never thought of it until now. What else can I don't know what else can I can say about that. It just.
Well, it could have been a handgun. Why a shotgun?
Oh, because. Well, the first thing, one of the first things in the movie that really people find astonishing when she blows this guy's head off with a shotgun. Now, it's an interesting story about that. I got the idea, how can I put it? Normally you cannot fire a blank or anything so close to an actor. So we put a big plexiglass shield in front of the actor so that she could have a shotgun right in front of his face. And then they rigged up the back of his head with pieces of, I don't know, whatever they found from the grocery store or something. And with a compressed air thing that they use for things like that. And it worked primo. And so many people have said that they just had never seen anything like that before. But I'll tell you a sad footnote to that. In a picture, in another movie that Pam did later, people wanted to do similar something with firing a gun in front of it. They didn't know it. I used a plastic shield. So the stuntman was injured. Yeah. I got the idea for that from, I did it in the Big Dollhouse. There's this scene where this was written, I didn't write the script, I rewrote a lot of it on the spot because it was so horrible. But it was just awful script. I had to do it because I needed a job. And it turned out to be a huge hit. I don't know why. But there was a scene there where this girl is lying naked on a table, and the villain woman had rigged up a thing like Edgar Allan Poe's thing, only with a python. So now this shot in the Philippines, and those guys knew how to handle snakes. They really knew how to do it. Right? So anyway, the snake was attached to this thing, and it was going lower and lower and lower. Now the actress would have been just scared bananas, but I put a plastic shield over her, so that just in case the python fell, Right, and I got that idea from James Bond movie. I think it was Dr. No. James Bond is lying naked in a bed, and he's got a tarantula crawling over him. If you look very, very carefully, you'll see the tarantula slips, which shows that the tarantula was on a plastic shield, and not even James Bond would lie there with a deadly snake on him. That's what I got the idea from. So that's a little footnote to history, if anybody's interested.
Yes, go ahead.
You spoke about the relationship between directors like yourself and the studios. So as Coffy made more and more money for the studio, why were they giving you a lower budget? And I mean, where was your leverage, and where was the other people's leverage to say, hey, we're making you the money. You're really benefiting from this. And it's hard to believe that, I wonder what the actors and the crew and, everybody seemed to kind of come out short, possibly.
I shouldn't have walked out of that screening with the movie. They were so proud of it.
Really?
Yeah, I was not even invited to the Foxy Brown. They just hated me so much that I was not even invited to a screening. I had to go to the theater to see the finished picture.
Imagine his own picture. That's how petty Hollywood can be.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
But I'm still getting money on it and those other
How was it having Roy Ayers do the soundtrack?
Yeah, that's an example of what I'm talking about. I never met him. Had nothing to do with the music. Once I finished shooting and I had a rough assembly of the picture, they didn't want to see me. They hated directors because they would have to pay me to do it. And they thought they knew better than everything else. So they hired, it turned out that they made the right decision when both those pictures, the soundtracks are like collector's items. Yeah, so I was very pleased with that, but I had nothing to do with it, I hate to say.
Any other questions out there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next, sir.
I have
Go.
some questions regarding the practical aspects of filmmaking.
The what?
The practical aspects. You said you shot it in 18 days. You're 9 years old now. How did you go about, what is your like daily regimen during production? How much sleep were you getting? What kind of diet did you keep? Like, how stressful did you take work home with you? That kind of thing.
You were 40.
Boy, that's a tough one to answer because it's really not much different. I remember that in the production, I'll tell you something. This is the way. Yes, you just don't ever dare walk out of the movie. But in the case of Foxy Brown, I brought it in a day ahead of schedule, and so I was a hero. To the studio, not to the poor people who were out of work on that particular day, you know. But anyway, because I wanted to get the damn thing finished, I just wanted to get it down. And it's strange because it turned out to be such a popular film. I wanted it to be just as, you know, outrageous is the word I use again. And it was, yeah. And I almost felt ashamed of it, but...
The ending is pretty strange.
Yeah, they wouldn't... Yeah, they didn't want to pay directors to participate in post-production. Now, when I was making pictures on my own, I did everything. I edited my own pictures. I even did soundtracks sometimes, and I worked with the composers, you know, very closely sometimes. But this studio, they would have had to pay me.
There's someone over there, please.
Just a quick question. What would be your advice to anyone in the audience that might be filmmaker, director, screenwriter? Your career was not exempt from, challenges of working in Hollywood. And we all understand the climate that's going on today with the strike. So what would you say to those individuals who might be inspired by you or walking in your footsteps?
There's just really no really simple answer to that question. A lot of it is just luck, being in the right place at the right time. But if there's something that really can change, you really need to write. You really need to learn to write. You need to study drama, what makes drama. You need to have an understanding of pacing. I think if there's any quality that I had as a director that was usually good, it's pacing. Know when to go slow, know when to go fast. And that's difficult to get a studio to understand if they want action. And action is not people running around like you see so much on TV shows, chases and all that. Action is dramatic action. And that's one thing that I think I was pretty good at. And but people who think action is they don't get it. The studio people, they don't really so often they don't really understand what makes a good movie, what makes a good drama. They think.
But that's what I mean. So how do you? There are so many factors that come with making films, right? Especially dealing with Hollywood. You have people politics, you have people thinking that they can tell you about your material or anything that that you've written or that you've created. Those are some of the challenges. How do you, form a strategy
I can give you one example that's a very good example of Francis Coppola, what he did. I came from a music background. I was brought up to be a musician, and I was a studio recording artist even, and so forth. And my ambition was to score films, so I went to UCLA cinema department to learn about making films so that I would have that knowledge. But I wrote scripts, in a writing class, and they encouraged me to go on. And I ended up dropping music and making a student film, and that's what got me going. So that was just little by little, and that's just my path. I can't really say what everybody has their own path, but I can tell you, Francis Coppola was my friend. We worked on each other's student films, and he came from a theater background, and he had written plays and directed them. And he was a really good screenwriter. And he wrote, he got a picture, he ended up writing a script for Patton, and that's what really got him as a director of important films. That was his way. But he came through drama and went to film school, yeah. But there's plenty of other people, Tarantino, he learned his film by just watching movies. It's a famous story that he worked in a film rental, movie rental place, and he watched movie after movie after movie, and he really studied and saw what to do. So when he got a chance to make a film, through good fortune, he did a good job with it, and then he just went on from there. So there's just no simple answer as to a path that will get you into there. But I can only say that no matter how you look at writing, is really key if you don't have friends and relatives in the business.
Do we have any more? We have time for one more question. Yes, please.
I was just curious what your influences were when you were kind of growing up in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, I can answer that. My dad worked at Warner's during the 40s and 50s. Warner Brothers had to work because of film, because of the war. They couldn't put a lot of them. They didn't have big budgets, so they had to make pictures about subject matter, where subject matter was more important than the production. And so they had all these great actors like Cagney and Bogart, as compared to companies like MGM that had Robert Taylor, Mitzi Gaynor. I mean, yeah. And so so these film noir movies and low budget pictures that they did, that was kind of my bread and butter of movies that I would watch, movies that I would know about. So I kind of came from that background where you got low budgets and. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, and also, like, as a follow-up question, like, Lon Chaney Jr. was in Spider Baby. Did you, like, grow up watching the monster movies, or what?
Oh, yes, I said, well, it's an interesting story how it came about, which I can tell you very briefly, but to answer your question, yeah, I watched it when I was a kid. I mean, I would almost want to hide under the seats with the vampire, and all the great Universal movies with the Wolfman and all that. And so, in my mind, Lon Chaney was the Wolfman, and he was a really talented guy who was more talented than most people gave him credit for. And so it came about that I had this deal with these guys who wanted to produce movies. I had the story for that picture, and they hired me to write the script and direct the movie. And we sat down figuring out who we get. We wanted to get Lon Chaney. He was my first. So we called his agent and submitted the script. And Lon Chaney loved the script and wanted to do it, but his agent said the guys, they could only pay $2,500 for him, which was more money in those days than it was today, but still not very much. But yeah, they said he would accept the script, he would do it, but he would want $5,000 to do it. Well, the guys, they just didn't have that kind of money. So they called back to his agent and said, is John Carradine available? Within a day, they called back and said, Lon will do it. He loved the script and he wanted to do it. And all the way through the shooting, he's just so much fun. He just loved the girls and he loved the whole thing, and he was just really, really happy with it. To me, it was such a sad tragedy that he died before the picture ever became popular and well known. But in those days, I edited the picture myself. And yeah, so does that help answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was so funny that he loved the script, he wanted to do it. His agent wanted more money, but when he thought we'd get John Carradine, who was his rival,
Did we see one more way in the back?
Let me just add
Yes,
one more thing. When I worked with Boris, with Lon Chaney, Boris Karloff was very popular at that time, and Chaney said, he's not one bit better than I am.
And yes, please, our last question in the back.
Hi, this is more of a comment than a question. I would like to commend you, Mr. Howard, and you, Mr. Hill. I think you directed a very, very entertaining and wonderful movie. I really enjoyed it. And this, to me, is a further example of why you can't always believe anything that critics say. Because when I grew up in New York City, they panned this film. They said negative things. Said, oh, she can't act, she can't act. I was watching this movie and I was enjoying it. I thought she acted her tail off. So that's why I said you can't always go by what critics say, and that's why I wanted to end on a positive note. I think you did a wonderful job.
Let's just respond really quickly to what you said, because it's important. The answer is racism and sexism. What was it one of the reviewers called her? Unsympathetic black chick.
Black tart.
If that doesn't say racism and sexism, I don't know what is.
I did want to ask one more question of Jack. There are gay characters in this film. We see the two women, the ladies in the prostitution office, and we of course see Priscilla and her man, and they're seeing. You treat them with respect, and you don't note their sexuality at all, which was very rare at the time. If you're familiar with Blackula, you almost can't see it because it's so homophobic. Were you conscious of that?
Did I say that?
You, in the film, presented them without any comment on their sexuality with respect.
Well, yeah, well, you know, when you grow up and live in Hollywood, you never get the idea that there's you know, that it's something odd or unusual. I mean, it's so common. But let me see if I can say something worthwhile. At one period of my life, when I was just very, very beginning to get my career, I was working for a guy who made nudist films, and they would 16 millimeter nudist films, and they would and so there was a lot of young women players, actresses, and it was so common that they were switch hitters, basically. And it was just the normal thing. You know, when I say switch hitters, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
AC/DC. And it was just a normal
Bisexual words too.
And I remember overhearing a conversation with a girl talking about how she used to go butch and now she's going femme. Now, when you grow up with people like that, you wonder what's all this talk about? You know, that's a whole world by itself, and nobody thinks about it. I think probably. I used to be butch, and now I'm going femme. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Hill, thank you for the stories. Thank you for the art. My reward is seeing you guys laugh and be surprised, and yeah.
reacting to the movie.
Thank you.